right? We are here to learn about analyzing poems. We're thinking specifically about our driving question, how should we read poetry? Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins is going to be the text we'll be using to answer this question. What I want you to do first is read this poem to yourself, mark the text as you're reading. There are 3 things I want you to focus on as you're analyzing your text, reading your text first. That is simile, metaphors, and pronouns. There's one simile. Most of the poem consists of metaphors. We also have pronouns, I, us, and them. Be thinking about, again, this driving question. Look for those 3 things. I'll ask that you pause the video at this time and attempt to do this on your own first. Once you've done it once through on your own, resume the video so you can watch me mark the text as well, okay? Right, so now at this point, if you're still watching, that means you've already read the text through at least once. I'm going to go ahead and read the poem out loud and mark the text as I read. I ask them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. All right, in that reading, I marked a couple things, specifically the simile, like a color slide. In that instance, a poem becomes a color slide. If you don't know what that is simply almost like film. If you hold up to the light, you can see the image. Or like a dollar bill, where you can see that face that's hidden in the paper if you hold it up to light. So a poem becomes a color slide in that stanza through the use of simile. In that next stanza, it's just one line, the poem becomes a beehive. That's important. We'll come back to that in just a second. The next stanza, the poem becomes a maze. Oftentimes we picture rats or mice being dropped into mazes in laboratories. That's what is happening with the poem here. Now, go ahead and pause and see if you can't figure out what the poem becomes in this next stanza on your own. Pause, and then when you're ready, press play. All right, hopefully you attempted this one. It's a little bit trickier. Oftentimes students want to say that the poem becomes a room, but if the room belongs to the poem, that may not be true. However, sometimes we refer to people's rooms by saying it is Mrs. Crane's room, or it is Sally's room, or Johnny's room. So it's possible the poem could be a room, but it's also the poem could be a house, because a house consists of many rooms. So I think either of those 2 options are possible, okay? Then next we want to water ski across the surface of a poem. What does a poem become in that stanza? Pause, guess, press play when you've guessed. Right, if you are playing the video, hopefully you took a chance and guessed. The poem becomes water, or a body of water. Some people say ocean or lake, doesn't matter, but the poem becomes water. Now, we're going to stop there because at this point, a shift occurs in the poem. So before we discuss the shift, I want to go back and look at maybe some of the meanings of these metaphors and similes. So a color slide, you can only see the image when it's held up to light. And I wonder what light could represent. That question we'll seek to answer later. In addition, we should also take note of the pronoun I and them. We should wonder that I is likely referring to Billy Collins as an author, and them might be referring to readers in general, readers of poems, okay? So in this stanza, Billy Collins is saying that poems are color slides, meaning we can only understand the poem when it's held up to the light, but we're not quite sure what that light represents. For the second stanza, poems become a beehive. When we think of beehives, I think of buzzing and full of life. When we talk about the maze, the poem is something, a maze is something to be explored. And the poem is also. Okay. And here the poem becomes a room or a house, something that needs to be lit up. In order to see. Interesting that light is emphasized in 2 different stanzas. That's something we might want to explore later. The last one, water. And here when we picture someone water skiing, waving at the author's name on shore, we picture someone who's maybe happy, someone who's having fun. Now let's address the shift. What do poems become after the word but, indicating a shift? Tying the poem to a chair with a rope, beating with a hose. There are different ways you can interpret this, but in these stanzas, a poem becomes, pause the video, guess, see if you can't come up with the same answer as me, press play when you're ready. In these last 2 stanzas, poems become victims or suspects, right? I think you can make an argument for either one. So for these metaphors in the simile, we have to think about what should and shouldn't we do with poetry? How should we read poetry according to Billy Collins? So there are some things he's arguing that we should do. You should definitely enjoy poetry. There's also some things we shouldn't do. Try to pause the video, come up with a list of things that we shouldn't do with poetry. Press play when you're ready. All right, some things maybe we shouldn't do are overanalyze, overthink poetry, and possibly we should avoid seeking just one answer. Poems are subjective, meaning there could be multiple interpretations. There are sometimes incorrect answers when it comes to those interpretations, but there are always more than one right answer. And that's what makes poetry and literature so cool. All right, so now we need to move on. Now that we've kind of answered this question, how should we read poetry? We should enjoy it. We shouldn't overthink it. We shouldn't overanalyze it. We should not just seek one answer. So let's answer that using literary analysis. In a short paragraph, I want you to use my template that I've given you as your topic sentence starter. The author uses blank, so put a literary device. I would recommend using metaphors, because that was what most of the poem consisted of. But you could also do simile or pronouns. And then to emphasize the author's opinion, that blank. And then summarize in your own words a claim about how we should read poetry. Please make sure that you're following our paragraph format by doing topic sentence, which I provided a template for you. Then do a concrete detail, which is a quote from the poem. Make sure that you're citing that and embedding it correctly. Put author's last name in parentheses with a period after that. Then after your concrete detail, you need 2 sentences of commentary. Then find a second concrete detail, a second quote, add 2 sentences of commentary, then wrap up your paragraph with a concluding sentence. Okay, set your timer on your phone for about 15 minutes. See how much writing you can get done in that time. Good luck.